The day I shipped my very first batch of wine overseas, a deal that should have been the proudest moment of my life, was the same day the HOA shoved a laminated paper in my face with 3 words that nearly took everything from me. Transfer request. Karen, the HOA president, stood there on my porch with that smug smile telling me my $15 million vineyard wasn't mine at all, that it belonged to the community. I built that land from dead poison soil, and now they were trying to steal it with a piece of paper. 9 years earlier, I had stepped onto 15 acres of land so ruined it looked like the surface of Mars. Salt crusted over every inch, the air smelled of chemicals, the weeds were nothing but brittle skeletons. I paid $127,000 for a property everyone else had walked away from. People laughed. My neighbors called it cursed. But I carried my father's words in my pocket along with his old watch. Land is the one thing they can't take if you know how to hold on. I swore I'd hold on. For the first year, I threw every seed I could think of into the ground. Tomatoes, corngrass, each one withered to dust in weeks. My savings drained fast, and every evening I sat on the porch staring at that wasteland, wondering if I'd been the biggest fool in Lake Millfield. The second year, I tried hydroponics, desert plants, anything desperate enough to survive. Nothing worked. By then, I was so tired from commuting to my architecture job 2 hours each way that I'd just collapse at night wondering if I should put the land back on the market and admit defeat. Then, one evening, as the sun bled orange over the salt flats, I noticed an old man walking with a soil testing kit. He moved like he knew exactly what he was doing. He looked at my dead fields, shook his head, and told me, "Flat out, you're doing it wrong. This land isn't dead, just poisoned." He stuck out his hand. Dr. Edmund Mitchell. Turned out he was the scientist who'd worked at the Cro-Mag research station back in the 80s, the very people who had destroyed this soil with their synthetic fertilizer trials. He confessed he'd carried the antidote all these years. And he said if I had the patience, we could bring the land back to life. For 3 years, we worked side by side, pouring enzymes into the soil like muddy medicine-breeding colonies of microorganisms, planting pioneer grape varieties. Slowly, miraculously, the white earth turned brown, then rich and dark. Our vines thrived. By the 9th year, I had a vineyard heavy with fruit buyers lining up to pay premium prices, and a future brighter than I'd ever imagined. That's when Karen showed up. Navy blazer, leather briefcase, the polished tone of someone who'd been practicing intimidation for decades. "Mr. Carter," she said, making herself comfortable in my living room like she owned the place, "we need to ensure you're compliant with environmental regulations. What you're doing here could have unintended consequences for the watershed." She rattled off enzyme ratios, EPA codes, even mentioned Dr. Mitchell by name. For a so-called neighborhood president, she knew far too much. At first, it was just paperwork, $15,000 environmental assessments, $25,000 validation tests, endless permits. But then came the community meeting. Karen had slides, fake property value reports, and neighbors she'd clearly prepped in advance. Mrs. Patterson, who used to bring me pies, stood up and claimed strange smells were killing her garden. Tom Bradley worried about his kids breathing unknown chemicals. Sitting there listening to people I thought were my friends, I felt like the ground was tilting under me. That night, staring at my father's watch, I asked myself if I was wrong. Maybe I really was poisoning the land. Maybe Karen was right and I was just too stubborn to see it. For the first time, I thought about selling, walking away. But then, Dr. Mitchell told me the truth. Karen wasn't just any HOA president. She was the corporate lawyer who had buried his research 25 years ago. She'd been part of the cover-up that destroyed his career, and now she was back working for Agrotech, the same giant that had been stealing soil recovery tech across the country. Suddenly, everything made sense. The technical questions, the legal traps, the community theater. She wasn't protecting the neighborhood. She was trying to bury us all over again. We brought in James Morrison, a former federal prosecutor turned IP lawyer. He looked at our notes, our lab results, even the signs of surveillance around my property. His face went grim. "You're sitting on revolutionary technology, but unless we patent it first, they'll steal it and make you the criminal." With his help, we filed provisional patents, documented every process, and started gathering evidence. Karen escalated fast. One morning, I woke to county inspectors demanding access to my land-waiving boxes of regulations I'd never even heard of. Weeks later, I found my greenhouse broken into notebooks, photographed samples missing. Then came the drones. 6 of them, black silhouettes against the sunrise, spraying a mist that burned my throat and made my eyes water. Within 2 days, my vineyard was nothing but shriveled vines and blackened soil. Mitchell and I ended up in the hospital poisoned by chemicals you can't buy in any store. The lab confirmed it custom herbicides traceable only to Agritech's own subsidiaries. This wasn't vandalism. This was corporate warfare. I thought that was the end. Orders canceled, debts piling up, foreclosure notices arriving daily. I'd lost everything. But then I realized their precision was their mistake. Those chemicals carried signatures that could only come from 3 factories worldwide. We had proof. We turned my engineering notebooks into evidence maps, soil samples into forensic gold. Morrison handed it all to the FBI, and suddenly this wasn't just a neighborhood squabble. It was agricultural terrorism. I decided to fight in public, too. I live-streamed the wreckage, row after row of dead vines, the chemical stench in the air, my voice shaking as I explained how an HOA and a billion-dollar corporation had teamed up to destroy one small farm. The video went viral overnight. Neighbors who'd once doubted me came forward admitting Karen had fed them lies and even offered money for their complaints. The FBI set up a sting. I agreed to meet Karen at her favorite country club. She arrived, confident, glass of wine in hand, certain I was broken enough to accept her buyout. She leaned across the table, that same smug smile from day one, and said, "Luke, you should be honored. Your little vineyard was worth our most advanced acquisition methods." What she didn't know was that I was wired. Every word was being recorded by agents sitting just a few tables away. At 6 the next morning, federal raids hit Karen's House Agritech headquarters and 23 other operatives across the country. Karen's voice on that recording bragging about drone attacks and fabricated complaints became the centerpiece of one of the biggest agricultural crime cases in history. She wasn't just an overbearing HOA president anymore. She was a convicted terrorist. And me, I stood in this middle of my ruined but unbroken land, the same land everyone had called cursed, knowing. I had finally held on the way my father told me to. They tried to steal my land, my work, and my future. Instead, they lost everything. Never forget, when you stand your ground even against giants, the truth can be the sharpest weapon you've got.